I hit Vega 9 wrong. Heat rammed through the chute, and the jungle swallowed me like a greedy mouth. Steam made the air into a drink I couldn't refuse. My harness tore on a thorned crown. My knee found a stone, the size of a prayer. My stomach threatened mutiny. I crawled out of the crater like I was being born into something that didn't want me. The trees breathed. Not a metaphor. Wet leaves literally flexed with the intake and outflow of a planet-sized lung. Biolum threads ran like veins under bark, pulsing slow and serious. In the canopy, kite bats squealed in a key that hurt the teeth. Everything shone with that green that makes a man feel honest about being small. For 7 days, a turquoise shadow trailed me. I never saw more than a slice, the arc of a shoulder, the edge of a cheekbone, amber eyes that caught light and gave nothing back. She left no prints. I left a confession. Torn fronds, blood beads, ration wrappers tucked under moss like I could bribe the dirt. The bruise on my hip became a second moon. My portable beacon died day 2 with a smell like roasted pennies. The jungle hummed louder. I talked to my canteen because a human tongue needs a witness. Tom Pierce, I told the trees. Pilot. Drop gone bad. I come in peace, or something close. The jungle replied with thunder that wasn't thunder. Far off, something big decided a path belonged to it. I adjusted my course. By day 4, I counted my steps in groups of 20. By day 5, I rationed my curses. By day 6, I learned the taste of dream dust pollen, the way it lingers on your molars like a lie. By day 7, I admitted I was being hunted, and that the hunter was patient, which is the worst kind of poetry. So I staged a blackout. I picked a carpet of moss with the resilience of old regrets, dropped my pack so it thumped with honest weight, and let my knees go soft. Face to the green, mouth slack, breathing shallow. One eye pinched to a crescent. The planet pressed its cool against my cheek, and I tried not to blink. She arrived like a fact. Turquoise skin the color of shallow sea over sand, hair braided with copper seeds, wrist cords woven from vine fibers that didn't reflect light. They drank it. Amber eyes, flat as coins. She knelt, and the air bent toward her like the jungle considered her a proper noun. I moved. Fingers snapped around her wrist, a twist given to me by an instructor who taught us to survive boardings, not fairy tales. Momentum took her forearm to a mossy trunk. My shoulder hit bark. She didn't grunt. Neither did I. We breathed each other's heat. I smelled crushed leaves and something metallic, not blood, ion almost. Her pulse beat against my thumb, steady and unimpressed. "Stubborn," she said, voice dry and low, like an engineer reading a failure report. "Not clever." "I'll take stubborn," I said. Clever burned up on re-entry. Silence stretched just long enough to see if we'd break it. I eased pressure, testing whether I'd misread everything. She looked at my hands the way a medic hunts for tremor. She found it. "Lyra," she said, as if that were a diagnostic. "Tom," I answered, because names keep humans from becoming debris. Her head tilted a degree toward the soil, like she listened for a hidden machine. "Rise. Water is close." I didn't argue. Thirst makes philosophers humble. I released her wrist, and she flowed back to standing in a motion that told me she'd let me pin her as far as she'd needed to learn my weight. We walked a green vein through the bowls until the air turned colder. The sound came first, a silky hammering, then the sight, a waterfall pouring out of a black rock lip into a stone bowl. Mist lifted like breath from a sleeping animal. I fell to my knees and drank until flavor turned from metal to miracle. When I looked up, Lyra watched me with that same broken engine, still useful look I'd seen in hangars. A problem that could carry weight. Ceasefire, I said, both palms up. Lost pilot. No hostile intent. I am Trail's guardian, she replied. No title, only gravity. Guardian, I said, and nodded like I understood. I didn't, but the word felt like a fence you could lean on without it tipping. She moved to the pool's edge and pointed. Do not touch that blossom. It makes your heart forget to argue. I followed her finger to a white bellflower, trembling though there was no breeze. I filed its outline next to things that look like hope and aren't. We stood in spray. The water stitched a thin line between us, cool as reason. Humor volunteers when fear gets tired. So, I said, do I pass the health inspection? Lyra blinked once, slow. You drink well. I laughed, first laugh in a week, and it startled a flock of glass wings into a burst of impossible geometry. Lyra's gaze paused on my mouth for a heartbeat too long. Then she looked away like she'd overstepped a line no one else could see. She taught while we circled the basin, which blooms numb and which sharpen. She broke a waxy pod. The sap hit my forearm and the rash retreated like a tide. Her fingers spread it with precise disinterest. Protocol hands. My people use this on hunters who forget wind, she said. I forget plenty, I admitted, but not coffee at dawn. Coffee, she repeated, as if parsing a threat. And dawn? First light through a kitchen window, I said, before caution could gag me. Steam on a mug with a chipped rim. Shoes in the hallway that aren't a trip hazard because you know them. Trash skimmers humming past. Shuttle shadows crossing like migrating geese. Someone 2 blocks away practicing the same wrong trumpet note until it's right. Ordinary. Heroic. Lyra listened like each word had a blade. The waterfall talked behind us. The part of me that counted exits counted something else. The number of times I wanted to keep talking. Not a promise, a possibility. We followed a path that wasn't a path, only a habit the forest tolerated. She stopped me with a palm at my hip, a touch calibrated to move, not to bruise. A blood drinker vine waited at ankle height, hairs so fine you'd only learn their hunger passing out 30 steps later. She cut it with a shard of green crystal. I learned. I told her about stacked air layers and why my descent lied to me by 3 degrees. She asked 3 questions that made me feel seen from the inside. Not the how of flying, but the why. Not the cargo, but who waited at the end. No one, I said, surprised at the accuracy. She weighed the word. Then you are lighter than you should be. We rested where the pool fanned into rivulets. My hands shook. She watched the tremor without pity or triumph, as if data were a kindness. The sun threw knives through the canopy, each beam edged in gold. Lyra moved like the trail had learned her spine. I moved like the planet had a long memory and a short temper. What now? I asked. Now, she said. Quiet fire, away from patrol paths. You have patrols? I tried to sound casual and achieved haunted. Always, she said. And for the first time, the word carried a history I couldn't read. We built a muffled fire the size of a secret, fed with damp chips that smoked sweet and low. She showed me how to tent the flame with leaf bone so no predator read our warmth. I showed her how to fold a ration wrapper into a wind baffle. She approved with a single nod that felt like a medal pinned in a place no one could see. I offered my hand across the tiny fire. Ceasefire, I said again. Ritual now. She didn't take it. Instead, she slid a wrapped root toward me with 2 fingers. Eat, she said. Then you will be useful to yourself. I ate. It tasted like roasted chestnut and peppered rain. I told her about Earth movies projected on hangar doors, about satellites blinking like patient insects, about a child I once taught to tie a line on a rescue shuttle because his father's hands were shaking too hard. She asked whether our cities regret their own beauty when they fall. I didn't have an answer that didn't taste like ash. The fire cracked softly. The jungle breathed. Lyra's eyes reflected the ember like a coin turning over and deciding its face. We listened to the forest tally the night. A branch flexed under something heavier than wind. I tensed. She didn't. "Not ours," she whispered, and touched my shoulder. Not to comfort. Calibration again. A precise dose to keep me from wasting blood on panic. When the dark thickened, we moved to a root ledge over the water. No tents. Only a web of vine that read our weight and held. She took the outer edge, the place where a fall would be first and worst. Guardian wasn't a rank, it was a posture. I watched the waterfall become a white thread. Sleep came like a loan with bad terms. Just before it closed my eyes, I heard her say my name, not questioning, only placing it where it fit. "Tom." "Yeah?" "Try not to die." I smiled into the moss. Protocol received. The current between us pressed, insistent and patient. Not a vow. Not yet. Only 2 lives with the same rhythm for one night. Morning smelled like wet stone and future. We broke the fire to ash. I shouldered my pack. My knee hated me. Lyra looked toward a ridge where mist rose in ribbons, and something older than law waited. She started walking without looking back. I fell into stride, 1 step behind. "Why help me?" I asked her spine. "Because you fell into my trail," she said. "Because you are loud and honest. Because you laughed at water. Those are terrible selection criteria. They are mine." We moved into the green. The waterfall faded. The jungle rode a thin path ahead with light. Somewhere far off, a machine I couldn't name turned once in its cradle and stopped. I adjusted my breath, adjusted my expectations, adjusted to the fact that I was no longer alone. Ceasefire held, for now. Possibility held too, like a small flame cupped in both hands so the wind wouldn't steal it. Dusk braided itself through the canopy, purple on green, and the small fire Lyra taught me to build breathed like a cautious animal. We fed it twigs the size of finger bones and covered it with leaf bone, so the flame became a rumor instead of a signal. Smoke curled low and behaved. I told her about Earth because silence would have turned my head into a radio I couldn't switch off. She made a listening shape with her body, hips squared, 1 knee up, elbows on it, chin on fist, like listening was a job she respected. I picked small things first. Dumb things. Busted vending bots that only did orange soda. Mag trams screeching because the city underfunded maintenance, and volunteers had to come grease the rails for free. A kid in a plastic superhero cape at 2 in the morning because his mom worked graveyard at a desal plant, and he wanted to see the stars from the roof, so I broke 3 rules and showed him. Lyra's eyes caught ember light and held it without glitter. "You build high," she said. "You fill the sky with your hunger. Then you break what you build." "Why?" "I don't know," I said. "Because sometimes the hunger wins." She took that in without judgment or surprise. Hunger is a tool, not a ruler. "Tell them that," I said, and gestured vaguely in the direction of home. The ground trembled under us, a low thud like a giant hand patting the earth to see where it was soft. Lyra's head turned toward the plateau above the ravine. A second tremor. A third. My stomach learned a very old trick called empty. "Shut it," she said, and the fire went dark under her palm. We listened to engines, not the soft hum of forest craft. Teeth. Vented fury. Military transport, low and arrogant. My pilot's ear started naming parts. Compressor whine too sharp, overclocked. 1 landing strut out of sync, stutters on soil impact. I could picture the ship now. Not pretty. Not careful. "Kyle," she said, as if spitting out a pebble that had been lodged in her mouth for years. Family, I guessed, before my sense of self-preservation could gag me. Stepbrother, she said. He wants old stones and new thrones. Another tremor shook leaf flakes loose. Voices rolled down. Metal talked to metal. Lyra did not look at me. She did not need to. We move, she said. We smothered the little fire into a hush. The jungle took back its warmth. We climbed by roots that knew her name and tolerated mine. At the rim of a ravine, we dropped flat. Through the fan of leaves, I saw the plateau, a bright wound of scraped dirt, 4 transports breathing heat, and a line of men in armor that made them look like the idea of a soldier instead of a person. My hate for that cleverness went down into bone. Kyle was easy to spot. Taller, cleaner, hair like a promise he would keep to himself first. He moved like someone raised to think, because I said so, is an argument. We're late, he shouted to no one, to everyone. I want survey rigs on that ridge by moonrise. The grove sits under this rock like an egg. We crack it. We feed a city. Lyra's breath thinned. It wasn't fear. It was numbers folding in her head. Roots, failures, costs, options, I whispered. She touched the dirt, tasted it with her fingertips, and smelled her fingers. Nobody on Earth would have thought that sane. On Vega 9, it was an equation. 4 scout lanes, 2 supply runs, scent markers that do not belong, hired off-world, not clan. My turn to add. Nav brain waking. That strut I heard is weak. If it sinks, they'll ground themselves. And their power packs are hot. They're overcharging for nights. You can make a rumor out of that. Her mouth tilted. Show me pilot tricks. I will show you trail teeth. Deal, I said, and we slid backward into shadow. We started small, because small turns big. Lyra rubbed crushed fern spore on our skin until my own smell became green and iron. She handed me cord that looked like vine and acted like memory. I taught her how to read the transport's intake rhythm and step between breaths to avoid heat cameras. She showed me where the forest hummed low with warning and how to walk politely through it. We rigged the first snare on a footpath, 2 scouts used with the arrogance of people who thought a planet was furniture. A silk vine across the ankle, a weight hidden under a leaf. When the second scout tried to help the first, his rifle went one way and his balance went the other. The ground held them like they owed it rent. We took a radio and left them a knife. Lyra's ethics were precise. Insult, not harm, unless harm insisted first. We salted their camp with words because words detonate too. An overheard whisper about a fever that ate lungs, delivered near the water drums, then repeated near the med kit by a voice that wasn't ours, because Lyra knew where rumor nests grew and which birds would carry them. I carved a few heat-sink vents open so they would hiss louder, suggestive, sickly. When a man believes his gear is betraying him, he begins to betray himself. Between strikes, we spoke less and understood more. Lyra tapped twice at my shoulder blade if I stooped too long. I flashed 2 fingers if the wind shifted. Scent would turn on us otherwise. A squeeze at my wrist meant drop. A brush at my elbow meant wait. I learned her body like a map of a place I would not own, but could move through without being hurt. At midnight, a patrol cut west too fast. I grabbed her and pulled her under a tangle of roots that smelled like rain and old hurt. She didn't fight. She compressed into stillness with a speed that made me want to apologize to every predator that ever underestimated anything. Boots pounded above us. Dirt sifted into my hair. Her breath was on my neck, controlled and quiet. My hand was around her forearm, not the wrist this time. Not control. Contact. The boots passed. The forest exhaled. We didn't move right away. A mosquito. No, not a mosquito. Something with a greener idea of blood. Hovered, decided we weren't on the menu, drifted on. I became aware of the heat of her skin, of how the line of her shoulder fit the curve of my palm, which felt like an answer I hadn't known I'd asked. I didn't say anything heroic. I just eased my fingers open. She didn't pull away. "We make them thirsty," she whispered, mouth close enough that the word brushed my ear. "Cut their water," I said. "Cut their way to water," she corrected, and I nodded, student again. We crawled from the root belly and turned the plateau's narrow stream into a geography lesson about humility. A fallen branch here to change flow. A little dam of stones there to stall it into a pool that spoke too loudly. Trails salted with crushed dream dust pollen. Not enough to knock out. Enough to make eyes sting and tempers eat their leashes. We rerouted footpaths into patches of thorn that had a sense of humor. "We aren't cruel," I told myself. "We're efficient." But when a man blinds himself on his own anger, it's hard not to believe in justice. Kyle stalked. He yelled orders that were both specific and wrong. He slapped a man hard enough to make a helmet ring. He looked up once at the ridge like he expected the grove to flinch. It didn't. "Tomorrow we burn the brush," he announced. "I want a corridor. We don't ask the forest for permission. We take it." Lyra's jaw tightened. Her hand flexed like she wanted to break the moon. "Leader," I said before thinking. She cut me a glance. "No," she said. "Guardian?" "You're both," I said. And I meant it. I had seen leaders who used other people as furniture. She placed bodies in spaces where they could survive. Different arithmetic. Better. We slept in shifts that were more like trances. The sky scratched itself with cold stars. In the hush between two animal cries, Lyra said, "He will try to cut supply lines at dawn. He will do it loudly. We will do it quieter." "How do you know his plan?" I asked. "Because he learns the wrong lessons," she said softly. "He thinks fear is the only tool. He thinks hunger must rule." "Then let's make him hungry," I said, and felt the mean sneer of satisfaction find my mouth. We cut their feet at first light. Fuel drums became decorations for a new shrine to incompetence, tipped just enough to weep into bad soil. A cable accidentally found its way around a landing strut, and when the ship tried to lift, the nose kissed dirt. Hard. Twice. I carved 2 degrees off a calibration pin on their comms tower, so their signals would skip like stones, missing every third heartbeat. Lyra laid scent arcs like code. Enemy patrols circled their own frustration until they broke formation, snapping at ghosts. Between moves, small language flickered. I would touch my chest with 2 fingers, then the ground. "I'm here." She would nod and brush her knuckles against bark. "I see." When my knee betrayed me and buckled, she gave me a stick with a curve that pretended to be a joke. When she bled from a thorn, I wrapped it fast and clumsy. She let me, though her hands were better. We didn't talk about why. By noon, rumors recruited for us. A merc with a big voice announced he'd seen the grove glow through rock. Another swore he'd heard singing that made his teeth ache, and his grandmother's name ride the back of his tongue. We smiled into leaves and made the singing happen again. 2 crystal slivers struck together behind a boulder, and a breath, blown just so, into a hollow root. Superstition does half the work if you let it. Kyle did not crack. He condensed. Anger turned into a blade that cut only one way. Forward. He called in a sweep. He set markers for burn lines. He announced an evening push that would hurt a lot of the right people and all the wrong things. The plateau smelled like fuel and pretense. "We can't hold them here," I said. "Not long." "No," she said. "But we can make the choice to stop them belong to more than us." "Council," I guessed. She nodded once. "The Grove of Light. They will call. The elders will choose. We will get there first." "Karst Bridge," I said. remembering the map she'd sketched in ash the night before. Dream dust, whisper vines. Muscle memory, she said, and I felt the words like a tether between us, old and new at once. We broke from the plateau edge and slid back into the green. Behind us, orders stacked. Ahead, a path that wasn't a path waited. I didn't ask if we'd make it. I checked my straps. I checked the weight of the crystal sliver in my pocket. I checked the distance between her shoulder and my hand. It was shorter than it had been in the morning. We moved quiet. We moved fast. We moved like the forest had decided to invest in us. And somewhere under the worry, under the tactics, under the angry precision, a new truth settled with the weight of something that wouldn't be moved. I no longer wanted to stand apart. We left the plateau like a whispered apology to the ground we'd used. The forest accepted our weight without comment. Lyra cut sideways through ferns that exhaled silver dust and pointed where not to breathe. Dream dust, she said. Sweet, then stupid. I held my breath and let my legs learn the path her legs remembered. The first gate to the grove was stone, pretending to be mist. A karst bridge, white and thin, arched over a gorge that sang with swallowed water. Wind pushed from below like the gorge had lungs. My knee complained in a language I respected. Lyra stepped first, barefoot, toes finding purchase in the limestone ribs. I followed, boots whispering. Halfway across, the bridge narrowed to a thought. I looked down. The river looked back like a sharp friend. Eyes on me, she said. I am, I said, because that was embarrassingly true. She smiled without teeth. It made the wind behave. On the far side, the path ran through a grove of fuzzy leaves that gleamed under their own shadow. Whisper vines, she said. Carnivores with opinions. What kind? I asked. About fear. She took my hand as if it belonged there and placed our joined fingers on a trunk. They drink panic. I let my breath flatten. I thought of coffee mugs and dumb trumpet notes and the kid on the desal roof, and my pulse slowed because those memories didn't need me to be brave. They needed me to be present. The vine lifted a frond, tasted the air, and let us pass like a gate guard who'd been told our names. We climbed through a slot in rock that scraped my pack clean, and then entered the grove. Light did things there it isn't paid for elsewhere. Crystals grew from the earth like frozen lightning, each vein tuned to a color that wasn't a color I knew. The canopy opened enough to let morning spill through in bands. Elders stood in a ring, skin like bark, hair like lichen, eyes so clear it made my throat hurt. In the center, a crystal monolith that hummed a single note lower than my bones. Lyra's shoulders changed. They were still straight, but the straightness was no longer a defense. It was a homecoming. The nearest elder lifted both hands. Lyra, she said, and the name turned the air into a ceremony. You were called. I came, Lyra answered. Her voice held nothing but truth, and truth held plenty. Fear, duty, defiance, a small secret flame with my name on it. Another elder flicked his gaze to me and did not pretend I wasn't there. And the off-worlder. Tom Pierce, I said, because names are bridges too. I bowed in the general direction of respectful. He nodded once, a ledger updated. The grove trembled. Not from us, from above. Rotors churned the air into angry soup. Kyle's transports ghosted into view beyond the cliff rim. Men decanting down ropes like beads spilled from a greedy hand. Armor gleamed. Faces hunched. Their boots didn't know how to land here. Kyle's voice came first, amplified, confident. People of the grove, he called, as if his words could rewrite the stone. You sit on power while your cousins go hungry. The crystals cure, fuel, build. We can feed a city, a fleet, an era. You hoard. I harvest. Great future, bought once, paid for by men like me. An elder stepped forward, palms up, old scars like maps. Power bought with root torn leads to collapse, she said. We keep the balance. You keep your ambition. Do not mix them. Kyle smiled at the elders, the way a storm smiles at boats. His men lit torches, ridiculous by day, useful by plan, and fanned out. Something ugly showed its teeth behind my breastbone. Time for pilot tricks, I said, and Lyra's hand found mine for a heartbeat. Permission, promise, pact. Then she moved to the monolith. I slipped into shadow and began to draw a circle through brush and stone. Slingstones sat in my pocket, smooth as prayers. The first torches I hit for practice, the sound of a stone kissing a brand, the hiss as flame met soil, the small confusion that spread from one man to the next like a contagious shrug. I moved faster. Torches blinked out up the line like a wounded constellation. Smoke drifted, hesitant now, unable to decide which side it loved. Kyle cursed. His men turned their eyes my way, which meant they didn't see Lyra place her palm on the crystal. The grove's hum deepened. Green light rose from the monolith with the slow certainty of tide. It found the vines that hung between the crystal spires and woke them. They weren't the whisperers from before. These had thicker appetites. They uncoiled like long thoughts and poured themselves into arcs that matched Lyra's outstretched fingers. Bind, she said. They obeyed. Vines curled around ankles and wrists, tender as cuffs, firm as law. Men shouted and slashed. The vines answered with patience and more of themselves. Torches fell and died in damp moss. I ducked behind a pillar of quartz and clipped another flame from a hand too slow. A merc tried to track me and caught a vine full in the knee. His scream turned into a whimper when he realized the vine wasn't breaking him, just holding him in place so his choices could marinate in shame. Gas, someone yelled. Don't, Kyle snapped, because even idiots fear explosions in holy places. Dream dust answered for us. The grove keeps its own pantry. Pollen lifted in a sheen from the low flowers, turned to a luminous fog by the crystal's pulse. Men blinked, rubbed, blinked again, wept. Some laughed without wanting to. Some argued with dead mothers. Some curled up and let the day step over them. The elders moved their hands in deliberate arcs, shaping the air. Shields flickered into place, curved planes of refracted light that caught thrown blades and laid them gently down. Embarrassed blades, chastised. Kyle waded forward through the failure of his plans, stubborn as a sunk cost. He reached for his sidearm. A vine shook its head. He snarled and jerked free. He was strong, I'll give him that, and dove toward Lyra. I came out of cover and met him halfway, because sometimes the only trick is a straight line. He was faster and hit harder. My shoulder screamed. The world tilted, then snapped back, and his fist turned my cheek into a drum. I grabbed his wrist like it had been designed to be grabbed, stepped in, and let weight and physics do their old duet. He went down hard enough to wonder how the sky got behind him. He rolled, mean and trained, and swung a boot. I stopped it with my ribs and felt a memory of every better decision I could have made. Then Lyra's shadow was over us. No, she told her brother. He froze because something older than sibling taught him to listen when that voice used that word. Elder shields settled around us like falling petals. The vines rearranged themselves into a ring. Green bars, soft prison. Kyle stood within it, chest heaving, eyes full of revolution and childhood. He looked at me as if I were a symptom. He looked at Lyra as if she were the disease. Traitor, he said, and the word hit her and slid off, not because it wasn't sharp, but because it didn't fit the person in front of him. I guard, she said. No apology, no boast. The elders spoke then, not loud, not slow, but with the exact pace of law-walking. "Kyle of the Platte blood," the oldest said. "You promised futures. You brought fire. You set hunger to rule. The Grove chooses balance. We strip you of commands we did not give. We exile you from paths we maintain. You may live, because we do not cut what can grow, but you will not lead." A murmur rose from his hired men, then fell when their own shame reached up and held their throats. One by one, weapons lowered. Helmets came off, exposing faces that looked naked without the idea of permission to be cruel. The forest wrote their defeat into its ledger with a leaf fall and moved on. Kyle's face closed. He stared at the crystal like it had cheated. "This is waste," he hissed. "You could feed fleets." "We feed generations," an elder replied. "We feed rain. We feed quiet. We feed a child's trail to the river so the child returns." He spat into the moss like a man who has run out of arguments and is now vandalizing conversation. The vines loosened at a gesture from Lyra, and he stepped free with the stiff dignity of a person who will later write a story in which he won. 2 warriors from a clan, not his, escorted him toward the karst bridge. He didn't look back. People like him don't. They rewrite forward. Silence went out from the monolith like a ripple. The pollen settled. The light shrank back into crystal veins. The grove exhaled and sounded like water deciding to be river again. Elders turned as one to Lyra. Their hands made the shape of a crown without touching her. "Guardian," they said first, because that was her name and her duty. Then, "Heir." The word placed itself on her shoulders with weight and bright heat. Lyra didn't bow. She didn't need to bend to belong. She lifted her chin a degree and accepted the load you only get by wanting it less than what it protects. "I will hold the paths," she said. "I will thread the clans. I will not cut what can grow." The elders nodded, simple as rain accepting ground. Around us, warriors who had pointed blades at the grove an hour ago now stared at their palms like they were reading new lines there. Some stepped back. Some knelt. Some quietly began to help unbind their own. Shame is a good teacher if you let it be. I found myself grinning like an idiot because I hadn't been killed in a holy argument and because the person I hadn't been killed beside was looking at me. Lyra's eyes tracked across crystal, elder, vine, and finally landed on the ordinary pilot who knocked out torches with rocks. Amber met brown. For a heartbeat, the grove had only the 2 of us in it, and in that small private country, a word walked without making sound. We. I felt it like a hand closing around a cup of flame to keep it alive. Not possession, not conquest. A choice, freshly made and already durable. Someone coughed. The ring of elders relaxed. Life resumed its ordinary miracle. I touched the bruise swelling on my cheek and decided to keep it for a while. Proof I had stood where I meant to. Lyra came to me. Protocol hand softened. She laid her palm against the hurt. Crystal light tickled the edges of her fingers. Heat spread, smart and gentle. Pain folded itself smaller. "Thank you," she said. "For throwing rocks?" I asked. "For standing," she corrected. "For witnessing. For being too stubborn to be clever. I'm reliably available for that." Her mouth turned almost smile. "Tomorrow," she said, glancing at the elders, the crystals, the paths that needed mending. "There will be meetings." "I've survived worse," I said. "You will again." She looked toward the karst bridge where her stepbrother had become a smaller problem. But today, we kept what should be kept. We stood in the grove of light, 2 small people under a wise machine disguised as a forest, and let the hum put our hearts in time. The grove woke with a sound like rain learning to sing. Elders spoke into morning, not at it. I stood a step behind Lyra, and let the new weight in the air settle on my shoulders too, even if it wasn't meant for me. Titles swirled, obligations chose places to live. The men who'd followed Kyle kept their hands visible and their mouths mostly shut. No one applauded. This wasn't theater. It was repair. Trails first, Lyra said. Then water. She didn't look at me when she said it. She didn't need to. My hands were already counting tools in a language they remembered. We started with bridges. Roots had taken the last flood personally and rearranged themselves out of spite. I showed the crews how to pin a truss with threaded bone pins that flexed like forgiveness. Lyra taught me the proper songs to hum while you bend wood so it doesn't split. We met in the middle of spans and made adjustments without pride fighting for a chair. When a plank moaned wrong, she put her ear to it and nodded to me. When a cable whined sharp, I found the anchor stone and shaved it 2 degrees. We were effective together. We didn't say that out loud. We watched water cross where it couldn't yesterday and let the truth right itself. The clans came. Not the way armies come, which is with noise that argues. They arrived with offers and problems, and the humility to have both at the same time. They brought seed memory for slopes that had forgotten harvest. They carried infants and the names of lost ones. They asked whether the grove would keep choosing balance when the hunger of the outside pushed. Lyra answered each face, not the crowd. When she didn't know, she said, "I don't." And then, "We will find out." I learned a new type of power, the tensile strength of the phrase "we." The first twist landed at noon 3 days later, disguised as hospitality. A courier from the Orbital Council came on a drop line with smile and mandate. He wore a jacket that had never met weather and spoke for a committee that had only read about forests. He told us the treaty I crashed through contained a protocol. If native leadership couldn't secure resource corridors safely, off-world trustees would assist. Assistants looked like contracts with nice fonts and clauses that turned guardians into subcontractors. He slid a device across the table. The contract waited inside like a polite trap. Lyra read with her whole posture. I read with a pilot's allergy to clauses about assumption of risk. The elders placed a crystal on the table and watched it refract the courier's smile into something true. "You will receive stipends," he said. "Education pipelines, a place in the new order." "Payment for a leash is still a leash," Lyra answered. Her voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. He tried me then. "Pilot Pierce, you understand logistics. You know the value of supply lines." "I do," I said. "I also know the cost of believing a schedule is the same as a soul." He blinked. We didn't sign. He left with his jacket still unwrinkled. Above us, I imagined orbitals making notes in careful handwriting. They would be back. Power always sends a second draft. We kept building. We hardened spillways where the river should be allowed to rage without taking living with it. We threaded water back to a thirsty lower village using pipe made from crystal husk and fiber, light enough for 3 kids to carry, strong enough to argue with a landslide. Out past the ridge, I found a collapsed relay and taught a crew to stack lenses so sunlight could carry messages without wires. Lyra stood in the glare, hair lit with 1,000 private fires, and judged angles with a hunter's unforgiving kindness. When the first clear message crossed a valley and returned, the old women cried like thunder had complimented them. Night smelled like sap and smoke. We argued and laughed more than we argued. When I got stubborn, Lyra would touch the inside of my wrist where my pulse liked to perform. "Stubborn, not clever," she'd murmur, and I'd grumble and do it her way, which, annoyingly, was usually better. When her spine went into that strict line that meant she'd fight gravity if it asked for too much, I'd tell a story about a vending bot that fell in love with the moon and we'd both remember what gentleness is for. The second twist arrived in the form of an apology I had to earn. Kyle didn't vanish. People like him don't. They reassemble. Weeks after the exile, a smoke column rose from the salt flats beyond the East Path. We found a caravan pinned under a collapsed wind tower, water brine sour, kids sleeping with the tightness of thirst. Kyle's men had tried to anchor the tower in moving crust. Bad math, worse pride. He wasn't there, but his orders were. I tasted fury. Lyra tasted duty. We could have let them sweat through their lessons. Instead, we built a sling out of spine rope and hauled the tower upright, while the crust groaned and shifted like a tired giant changing dreams. I climbed with a wrench in my teeth and fear in my back. Lyra sang the salt into remembering it owed the river a favor. When the blades finally took wind, the caravan's faces unclenched. Later, one of Kyle's lieutenants found me and shoved a packet into my palm without eye contact. Maps, codes, names. "I'm tired," he said. "He'll come back wrong." That was the apology. It was enough. Months turned by the measure of repairs. The council asked Lyra to wear a band of polished bark on her forearm so visitors knew who to ask for. She wore it like a splint, not a crown. People brought disputes about footpaths and who got first water on days when the river sulked. Lyra listened, drew lines in the dirt, and erased them when a better line asked for space. I stood behind her like a door that could be closed if needed. Then came the day that wasn't work. The ceremony hid itself in plain mourning. Elders acted like this was just another council. Kids tried to act like they weren't hiding behind trunks with flowers. Lyra pretended she didn't notice 3 women weaving biolum crowns that pulsed in a pattern I realized matched her heartbeat. Someone handed me a clean shirt. I wiped my hands more than a man should. We stood beneath the crystal spires that had once hummed war and now hummed promises. The crowns went on with the lightest touch. I felt ridiculous and seen. Our rings rested in a shallow bowl of water that held the grove like a mirror. Sapwood amber, soft gold, living scent. I remembered telling her about coffee at dawn and realized this was that, turned inside out and made into a structure. Lyra took my left hand with her right. Protocol hands, unprogrammed. "I hunted you for a week," she said, voice low enough it traveled only to me and any curious vine. "You were loud. You were honest. You laughed at water. I learned how to laugh back." I swallowed around a stone that hadn't been there a second ago. "I landed wrong," I said. "You fixed my course. You keep doing it, and I keep needing it. I won't stop needing it." "We do not promise not to need," an elder intoned, and the crowd hummed agreement, a sound like leaves in a friendly wind. "We promise to carry need without making cages." "Then that," Lyra said. "With him." "Then that," I said. "With her." We slid sapwood onto skin. Heat pulsed through the amber as if the grove itself had decided to keep time for us. There was no kiss, because that would have turned the moment into theater. There were foreheads touching, breaths shared, and the particular silence crowds make when they witness a choice and agree to guard it. After, in a cottage built into the roots on the pool's quiet side, Lyra pretended to scold me for leaving a wrench on the table. I pretended to be surprised it had migrated to the exact place it was most useful. The crowns hung on a peg, still glowing faint. Outside, children tested new bridges by running across them louder than necessary. Inside, my chest had room I didn't remember giving it. "I never meant to hunt this long," she said, semi-smiling, hair loose, the bark band on a chair instead of an arm. "I surrendered the first night at the falls," I confessed. "Took me a while to write the report." "I accept your late paperwork," she said gravely. We set our vow as simple as the river's logic. Guard the grove. Teach our future children to listen more than they speak. carry this light farther than the vines can reach, not by force, but by example so stubborn it looks like a landmark. The third twist forced us to keep that vow sooner than sweetness would suggest. The orbital council returned with subtler knives. A sickness rode with them. Coughs that chewed air into razors. It spread along the trade paths and ignored the bright line of jurisdiction. Their med tents brimmed with technology, but the illness had opinions about authority. Lyra took my hand, and we went to work. The crystals offered heat that pulled fever down if you asked them in the right language. The whisper vines drank panic so lungs could remember their job. I bent pipes so clean, water reached a clinic a day earlier than despair would have, and a day makes the difference between a headline and a history. We opened the grove to strangers. We did not require kneeling. We traded knowledge for willingness to learn. The council's envoys watched a forest teach medicine. They watched their forms fail in the presence of patient systems. Some wrote notes. Some cried where no one could see. Most stayed to help. The crisis broke, not because we crushed it, but because enough people carried it until it got tired of being heavy. When the last cough quieted, an elder turned to the council and asked a question no protocol had space for. "Will you sign our treaty instead?" It was a thin sheet of bark and a thick set of expectations. The envoy who'd once sold me a leash took the stylus. He looked at the people alive because of the grove, and at the woman who had refused to belong to his forms, and at the ordinary pilot who kept finding the right wrench. He signed. Others followed. The crystal hummed in a key I recognized from mornings, with coffee I didn't yet know were practice for this. Seasons turned. The karst bridge grew a spine of woven fiber that made even my knee trust it on bad days. Kids learned to read light. Old arguments lost their taste. In our root cottage, we argued about where to hang tools and laughed more than we argued. On cool nights, we told the kind of stories you can put in a child's ear without breaking anything. When patrols passed too close, we lit no fires and let the whisper vines practice ethics. When the first frosts came, Lyra put my hand on her belly and said nothing for a long, good while. I think about falling often, out of orbit, out of habit, out of the idea that being alone makes you safe. It turns out I fell into a net that was already there, made of people and promises, trail lore and a stubborn river. We chose. The grove chose back. And because of that, many got to choose living. That's the report I keep writing in my head whenever the morning smells like wet stone and future. That's the vow under the sapwood ring. Guard the grove. Teach the small ones to listen. Carry the light in our hands and in how we use them. Let hunger be a tool. Let balance be the ruler. We stand together and protect the world we chose.